Good afternoon, this is Angela with Parkrose Permaculture. I want to make a quick video before I lose the light here. It's unusually warm for January in Portland, Oregon. It's in the high 50s, and so I'm taking the opportunity to muck out my chicken coop. Hello, sweetheart. I have a couple of broody hens, so one of them is not super happy she's kicked out of the coop, and the other one is staunchly refusing to leave. So we'll see if they give us any attitude while I make this video. So we have a coop that's from freeze ground stuff. It's not gorgeous, but it's really functional. It's tall, so I can stand up inside of it. It's tall so that it can serve as a trellis for grapes and a rambling rose. And it has this really nice, useful awning off the front because it's so rainy here. My chickens need somewhere protected from the rain where they can still be outside. So if you have a coop in the Pacific Northwest, I really think an awning is crucial. If you're free ranging your chickens, give them somewhere to hide from the rain. They are not going to be happy being soaking wet and sodden all the time. Okay, so yes, our coop needs some repairs. It's constant maintenance because here where everything is rainy, everything gets mossy and algae and laden and breaks down quickly. Wood doesn't last. So when mucking out the coop, I use the deep bedding method, and I thought I would share a little bit about it here. Now, I have this giant rosemary that I just took out this weekend from our front yard. I started it from seed 10 years ago, and it was the biggest rosemary I've ever seen. Rosemaries can basically layer. If you let the branches touch the ground, they can root. So my rosemary had spread and had covered half the front of the house and was just enormous. And unfortunately, it had caused some damage to the front of the house, and we're going to be doing some house updates this spring, repair work, so it had to go. So I'm real sad about it, but I also want to be careful where I put these prunings in the garden now because they might root and I might end up with rosemary where I don't want it. So a great way to use up a chunk of these, and there are dozens of branches this large in my front yard that I'm trying to use up, but a great way to use up several of them is going to be in the deep bedding method in my chicken coop. So what is deep bedding? Deep bedding is where you don't muck out your coop very often. You can do it once or twice a year. Sometimes folks do it 3 times a year. Sometimes folks do it once every other year. Depends on your climate, how stinky it is, how good you are at scraping down your perches. So basically, it is a low energy method where I'm not in here every week shoveling out chicken crap, right? I'm in here twice a year to do the heavy work. And then once a week, I have very light work that just takes a few minutes. So here's the door to our coop. So this is what it's looked like as I'm beginning to shovel out the bedding when it's fully decomposed. So you can see here's one of a couple of buckets I've already removed. I'm going to have several wheelbarrows full because this goes under the ground maybe 6 inches. So deep bedding, you are letting the manure and whatever green and brown organic matter you put in here take its time and compost nicely. And as you can see, the chickens will get down and work through it and speed up that process. So in deep bedding, I'm going to be taking, actually, if you look, I can't get in there very well right now, but right here on the other side of this wall, I have a paint scraper hanging up, and I use that once a week. Takes 2-3 minutes. I come in and with my paint scraper and I just scrape down the perches and the nest boxes in the coop and knock any of the poop off. Because the reality is I have a perch up high here, and then they have their ramp to their door and it gets poop on it. And so you just scrape it real quick, hang the paint scraper back up inside the coop. That's it. And then I throw down some more bedding, which is a pile of whatever I have going on right now. Rosemary. A lot of the times I use things that don't do well in the compost. I use material that will be, that I'm leery of using in my regular compost because it might re-root and might become invasive. So I use mint prunings by the bucketful in here because they are not going to live when they are done in this system. There's nothing left but humus, right? Nothing's going to germinate. No little bits of rhizome are going to live. They're all going to get destroyed. I also use raspberry prunings. So let me get down in here. Unfortunately, I'm not in the greatest pants to be kneeling in the mud. We had a terrible rainstorm last night, so while it's dry today, it's quite muddy. I have a problem in this corner of the coop, which is this australorp here. I'm If you've seen any of my other videos, you know that I am a big fan of Australorps. Hardy, easygoing, not the friendliest chickens, but they're real chill and they lay a bunch of big brown eggs and they lay for a long time and they're pretty independent. However, they can go broody. So I end up with a problem where at the end of the cycle here, where it's this lovely, fluffy, loamy brown matter, I end up with inevitably a broody hen who wants to lay on the ground. So to deter that the rest of the cycle, I love to use raspberry prunings because they're thorny, and I use gummy berry prunings and I use goji berry prunings. Anything that's thorny, chopped up and thrown on the ground as a deterrent to keep my chickens laying in their nest boxes and not on the floor. Because I'm 41 years old and I don't want to climb back in there and have to get the eggs up off the floor every day. So here at the end of the cycle, you can see these little sticks here. Those used to be big tangles of raspberry prunings. And eventually they get scratched and broken down. So I'm scraping off the manure once a week or so, and then I'm throwing down some more clippings. And it slowly builds up, and actually this gives off a nice amount of heat, keeps the coop warm in the winter. And eventually it breaks down, and I shovel it all out. So the last month or two before I'm ready to shovel out all of this lovely organic material that I can put straight on the garden bed. Let me show you what it looks like here at the end of the cycle. So I stop adding green clippings and I just let the chickens work it over at the very end. And what you end up with is this lovely fluffy, sometimes there's a pebble in there, sometimes there's a bone from where I fed them, you know, a ham hock or something after we've used it for soup. And I end up with this lovely fluffy material that is a combination of their manure. You can see here there's feathers. I don't actually sift this, but all of the organic matter is really broken down, and you can see there's no living bits of mint rhizome or raspberry cane. It's all really broken down, and I can put it straight on the garden. So using the deep bedding method, I am maximizing the system to do the labor for me. I am minimizing how much labor input I have to put into it. If you have to do less work, you're more likely to keep using a system if it's not labor intensive. And then I can shovel out all of this lovely stuff here and use it in the garden, which is what I'm doing now. Now, if I had designed my system better, and I'm thinking of making changes this year, I would not have put my chicken coop at the very bottom of my yard, downhill from everything else. I would have put it at the top of my yard, and then I could shovel the compost and roll it downhill much more easily. Right now, I have to wheelbarrow it up into the garden beds. So that's not an ideal setup, but the deep bedding does do its own job, and it helps me get rid of those prunings and that garden material, green and brown, that I don't want to put in my compost. And also that serves as a deterrent to keep my chickens from laying on the ground. And in the end, produces great biomass for me, rich, fertile, nitrogen-rich soil that I can use directly on the garden. So I hope that video gave you a little look into how I take care of my poultry here, how we do our deep bedding method. I will be back tomorrow with more from the garden, hopefully, if it's not too rainy. I'm gonna get back to shoveling before it gets dark. Thanks.